evening viewers, and evening ladies. Handsome Barry here, bringing you some important news on Planet X, Nibiru, and connecting the dots with a possible Jade Helm Walmart connection and way more. Tonight's show promises to be a real one for thought. Ladies, this is extra special for you as not only has the boss let me do the intro, but he has given me the whole broadcast to take care of. So ladies, get comfy, hug that new t-shirt and enjoy. Guys, well, grab the snacks and see if this option as to the Walmart closures and the sudden military exercises and stuff is one to consider. There is lots to show and for you to take in, so we shall start with our ongoing prediction of Nibiru Planet X timeline, which we have been running for over 6 months or so, and indeed, as pointed out, does tie in with the happenings, and could well be bang on the mark timeline-wise. We start with a fresh Art Bell radio presentation from a guy who started chasing where the trillions money missing from the USA Treasury went, and this led to doing more research. So without further ado, let's roll the video and add some graphics while you listen. Do not worry ladies, I will be back soon. So for now, sit back and be patient, and enjoy and be educated by the video.
Basically you were chasing corruption in the government, and now you're working on Nibiru. Tell me about this transition.
Well, basically, as I started to mention a little earlier here, we ended up chasing the money first off. It's that old thing, follow the money. Huge amounts of money vanished. So I realized after tapping back into old resources and even going back into some of my own files where I'd had people talk to me about underground facilities way back in the 90s, and one thing led to the other, and it became the connecting of the dots of politically, scientifically, financially, and every other thing that seems to affect us on a regular basis. It all went in one direction, and that was the realization that the mystery Planet X that had been talked about almost like a fable for so many generations, so many years, and of course people that have done great amount, some folks that have spent their entire lives dedicated to studying all the old scriptures of all around the entire globe, going back 4,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, and the realization that Planet X was a real item, that it was genuinely in apparently a huge elliptical orbit, and was on its way back in. And that was, according to my information, it was discovered about 1983 in terms of being a discovery in Washington, D.C. by President Reagan and, of course, Vice President Bush, who was actually the president during Reagan's time, too. But the bottom line being that someone at that point in time came in and said that huge infrared telescopic satellite that we sent out to the fringes of the solar system has just broke everybody's bubble, because the planet Nibiru, Planet X, does exist, and it appears that it's on its way back in. So sometime during that period of time in the early 80s, the powers to be, so to speak, I refer to them as the bad guys or the shadow government, they sat back and they said, uh-oh, if this is real, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
How bad is it? When's it going to come? If it's coming in 100 years, we don't care. But we're talking in only 20, 30, 40 years that this is going to be coming back, and it is coming back. So I had studied a multitude of astronomers that have studied it. All of those research had been done, and I came to my own shocking conclusion that Planet X Nibiru is a reality. And the bottom line is the United States has built all these unbelievable underground facilities as survival facilities for the limited few that are going to be allowed in underground. Today's news that you even mentioned, talking about making movements with the equipment.
Oh, amazing story.
At the Cheyenne Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
That's in our report. The bottom line is they moved stuff out of there about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, and they made alterations and changes they have just converted that into what amounts to being one of the primary out of 100 of them underground in the United States. That's going to be one of the primary hideaways. But it's interesting because what they're saying now is they're expanding it or building, putting in updated equipment, et cetera, because they had actually moved all of that out about a year and a half ago. And but what has also happened since the last time we spoke, which is about 4 or 5 months ago, I guess, last time I was talking with you about this, many things that I had, in fact, predicted has, in fact, taken place. That is, of course, a tremendous increase in sky activity. What I mean by that is the planets starting out by Pluto and coming inward are all changing in the external chemistry structure. They're all heating up, and they're being aggravated by something. Some of these has been going on now, for about a year, but that's all actually a lot of news releases on that. But the bottom line is, of course, it's not in the regular news. You have to kind of flip over the pages and roll over some rocks and look around to find some of these actual news reports. So what we have is all the planets are being irritated by something. The sun now
and
is
people too are getting irritated, Bob, by something. I mean, it's bizarre, but something's happening.
Yes, and it's easy when you can fall into a trick bag when you do a study like I ended up doing, because ordinarily I wouldn't touch the Planet X with a 50-foot pole, because it was something rather fell into the fanciful direction. But when I got into the nuts and bolts of the politics, changing their entire space programs a few years ago, putting these underground facilities, filling them up with survival foods to the extent that the average guy had trouble buying that for the last 2 or 3 years because the primary contracts were going to the government for all of the freeze-dried stuff and what have you. The underground facilities we're talking about, and I have a list of them on my website, some of them are really huge. And then when I found out that in Russia, in 2010, they put out a mandate to create 5,000 smaller underground facilities, which they did accomplish by 2015, by the beginning of this year. They've accomplished that. They have some of them are large, but a large quantity are what we would call smaller facilities. Now, all at the same time, the things these are the dots that people couldn't figure out exactly what was going on, like supplying military weapons and equipment and buying billions with a B of bullets and to supply small weapons to all the sheriff's departments and the police departments around the country, and of course troop carriers, hand grenade launchers, and things of that type into our police facilities. Everybody said, what's going on with that? Why are they buying so many weapons and bullets and machine guns and things of that sort that you could actually fight a war, a World War IV, a 3, 4, and 5? It's an extraordinary amount of weapons.
FEMA just contacted one of my clients. They produce storable food, and they wanted to buy up the entire inventory, Bob.
Yes, and they have been doing that, see, and their target has not been that. These are the things get really spooky when I got into this. You can always say, well, they're doing it for this, or it's down the road, or they're worried about something else, or what have you. And everything points to one thing, and that is an intergalactic, unbelievably serious event taking place. If the wealthiest elite of the world are digging holes for themselves to hide in and have been filling them with the foodstuffs like you're talking about, the foodstuffs for 5-6 years now, you couldn't buy them. You couldn't get enough because the contracts were all obligated to the government. And the reason for they have now also something that's been banging around the internet like crazy. All right, is the upcoming planned exercise to take place. It's sort of a synthetic martial law that is to be done by all of the military sources cooperatively under Homeland Security sometime between June and September. And this is something that's slowly been coming out, and it has a name. I think it's I don't have it in front of me. It's not something but it's a it's got a regular title for it at this point in time. Okay. It's called Helm something, whatever. I can't think of it at this point. But it is a real event that people are picking up on. Now, what this is basically a dry run for martial law. And of course, again, everybody says, well, why? What is it? I wonder what. Why would they even be doing this? Why are they practicing and educating the general police forces to handle this? What's the idea with that? Well, they're going to. Everybody asks. They say, when will the government tell us about the incoming of Nibiru?
It's called Operation JADE HELM 15.
JADE HELM. That's what it is. I couldn't think of it to save my life. And that is a dry run preliminary on martial law. The bottom line is this. The people that are in control at this point in time have their hands in our budget and can take and do what they wish with the money, and have been creating hideouts for themselves underground, 103 of them, give or take. All right? They will never be able at any time come forward on the news and say, hey, we have bad news. A planet's going to come back around in a couple of months, and it's going to create complete global destruction like Noah's floods, which I believe Noah's floods was, in fact, Nibiru on one of its earlier patents.
And in order to keep government alive, we have decided to move underground, but you can't go.
Right. And the only way, if you just apply logic to this whole situation with buying the bullets and getting ready for martial law, going underground, changing the space administration, the whole thing has been changed in 20 years. And lying to us about all kinds of ridiculous reasons for buying equipment and things. When all of that, the bottom line is, if the people knew ahead of time, it would be complete global havoc and riots. There's no way that you can present this to the average person in a manner such it's going to keep them from not going completely out of control. So they're going to have to, at one point in time, the Planet X Nibiru is going to be visually seen on the horizon, up in the sky. It's going to be a new star. It will appear originally as a singular star, even though it's a large planet, calculated to be 5 times the size of Earth, and carrying with it 4 or 5 moons that travels around it like its own little solar system itself. And additionally, of course, the unbelievable tail, like in the tail of a comet, like Halley's Comet, that has a 24 million mile tail. That's just a frozen snowball that comes around every 75 years. We have no idea how big the tail of space debris is going to be dragging behind Nibiru. And when it comes, we're going to travel through it at least twice when it comes in to go around the sun and then back out again. We will, under our regular orbit of going around the sun, we will, in fact, go through it twice. And going through that tail is going to be an experience that no one's going to want to
And I suspect, Bob, we've gone through this before in earlier history of this planet.
That's correct. And I'm the messenger on this thing. I'm an expert in certain areas, predominantly corrupted politics, if you will, but I have the ability to put A, B, and C together. Sometimes you just have to get your prejudice set aside and just say, I have to really look at this through clear glasses. What in the world would cause these people to stop stealing money for their own pocket and start building hideouts? And so, again, I tapped into those guys and organizations that have studied this thing for years and years. And a fellow named Gil Broussard is one gentleman that has a wonderful investigative research on this. Many other people, including people that have been eliminated because they were high-level astronomers that were told to keep their mouths shut, and they are now deceased because they didn't keep their mouths shut. But the bottom line is, you're correct. It has been around. There is a debate between, let's say, Group 1 and Group 2 as to whether it's a 3,600-year elongated orbit or if it is a lesser orbit of about 350 or 360 years. In that case, obviously, simple mathematics, that it would have been here 10 times in passing around close to the Earth, if in fact it's on a shorter orbit. But the agreement is, of course, the approximate date that has been calculated by these folks who have done extraordinary, some of the studies that gone back, studying the, let's say, the Egyptian writings, the Tibetan monks on the top of the Himalayas, the writings that they've done, the emperors of the ancient Chinese, where they actually followed this thing. They called it the visiting star or the red dragon, and they actually followed it in their own scriptures and wrote these things down. And you can actually verify most of these events to be true and correct times. In other words, you can verify pretty much when it had passed. So the question was, and these guys have, again, I'm not the astronomer. I don't pretend to be an astronomer, but I understand it. And the bottom line is that it has come by. It has been logged in the diaries of these ancient cultures, in the Bible. It's described in biblical writings. And the bottom line is that it has come around. It's caused floods like Noah's floods. I had just analyzed it, and I said the winter of 2015 that we've just been going through, I said it's going to be the craziest, the worst winter the United States had in hundreds of years because of Nibiru. Now we have today President Obama mentioned the fact in an interview with, I think it was CBS, a sit-down interview. He was talking about the climate change. Well, it's not it's not because we were smoking too much. It's not because we had too many smokestacks coming out of the factories and all. The climate change is taking place because of Nibiru's. Yes, that was kind of interesting. Like many of them that have been drifting around from high-level people, there's a scientific non-profit organization. Actually, they're based out of, I think, Orlando, Florida. And about, I guess now probably it's a year ago, they notified the president with totally a separate but a very specific, a non-requested study. And they said, basically, Mr. President, we want to warn you that we have done our calculations, et cetera, and that the Earth is heading towards a period of time, in only a short period of time, where we're going to be experiencing climatic conditions are going to be non-reversible for a long period of time, et cetera, et cetera. Now, they didn't mention Nibiru as a cause. Some of these organizations, even if they were pretty sure that was what it was, they won't say much. But they were, of course, this was reflected only about 9-10 months later. Again, this is maybe a year ago this was sent out, where we have this extraordinary winter, and it is a global thing. If you don't, and most of us don't do this, if you don't pay attention to what goes on in Malaysia and Russia and China in terms of the weather, but the global condition of the weather has been record-breaking at least for like 4 years. And then, of course, we saw what happened in our winter here. Nibiru is sort of functioning, I call it kind of the bowling ball effect. And as it returns with all of its the gravitational effects and the electromagnetics involved with it, and of course the physical effect of crashing its way back through from the outer reaches of our own solar system, it's affecting already, as I mentioned earlier, all of the planets. They're changing. They're becoming atmospherically perturbed by some very radical element, and of course it is Nibiru.
And it's affecting other planets in the solar system too, not just ours.
Correct. And as a matter of fact, just in March 26th, a couple of, which amounts to like a month ago, if you will, there was another research group that came out, a group of Russian and American scientists together, and they said for some reason, and again, whether they know it or not, they're not mentioning Nibiru, but they're saying that for some reason there's an entire a layer of warm something covering the atmosphere in Venus. They don't know what it is. And by the way, this is something, if you look up unexplained warming of Venus, if you just put that in your computer, you can find this yourself. It took place March 26th. And it's a press release that basically says something is causing some strange temperature variables going way up and turning the entire surface into the chemical alteration of what they're able to measure using satellites and et cetera. And this is above and beyond what we had already put in our DVD, which amounted to being done, let's say 9 months ago when it was finished, that all of the planets have been affected one way or another. Now, we watch the sun. The sun has been going through extraordinary, record-breaking electromagnetic force fields, breaking off and shooting into outer space, holes being generated on the surface of the sun that they don't understand. They simply say they see it, and it's gigantic. When you look at these outbreaks of solar flares compared to the size of the Earth, they dwarf the Earth. It's like a flea on the back of a small dog or something. It's unbelievable in the size of these things. And an interesting point, which we also covered in our DVD as part of the politics of this thing, we found out that Janet Napolitano, the former head of Homeland Security, and also James Woolsey, the head of CIA for many years, both of them quit about a year ago, left their positions. And for some strange reason, they both felt it was necessary to give a global warning and saying that electromagnetic forces will be striking the Earth, and if we're not prepared for them, it's going to be devastating. Now, again, neither one of them indicated it was Nibiru, but that's because these people at that level and in NASA have been told, do not talk about Planet X, because if you do, it's a top secret, above top secret news, and you're not to release it. So they don't talk about that, but they do come out and talk about the AMF. And what they said was it's not a matter of if it will happen, it's a matter of when, and they both indicated it would be in a short period of time. Now, again, this is an aggravation of the face of the sun because of the incoming of Nibiru. And again, it's a multitude of unbelievable records being broken. Only a few weeks ago, the biggest landfall hurricane or typhoon struck over near Malaysia or someplace,
sure.
And it was like 200 and something mile an hour winds hit one island and just erased it, just cleaned it off. And and again, it's something, if you're not looking at it, if you're not snooping into the unusual, you'll miss it, because it's not going to be on the evening news, that's for sure.
Well, Zecharia Sitchin, of course, pointed out, as we mentioned in his work, about Nibiru after his interpretation of the Sumerian messages and texts.
Correct.
They left a message for us, Bob. They told us that this planet is out there. It comes around. The flood of Noah was probably responsible for it.
I'm sure, and I'm sure that that's correct.
Okay.
And after looking at Sitchin's work, you can always disagree with opinions and what have you. A lot of people say, "Oh, that was baloney," But again, when you put all the dots together, if there's somebody out there that can genuinely look me in the face and explain why our government at the high level, the shadow government, has put billions and trillions into underground facilities. If you can give me a good reason that it is not the returning of Nibiru, I would like to know what it is, because then I've made a mistake. And I would love to be wrong about this.
I understand.
But I'm afraid. I am afraid the bottom line is, in a short period of time, and we have an estimated date of arrival, in a short period of time, it is going to pass by again close. And it's not.
What is that estimated date, Bob?
I believe I agree with 2 or 3 groups that have been studying this for so long. And the earliest potential returning date where it actually will be first seen in the sky in December. And again, this is relative
of this year.
Of this year, and it will be seen as a star. It'll, of course, obviously get larger on a monthly basis, and then it'll be December, and then January, February, and then March and April will be the period of time will be closest, causing the most radical effect on our Earth itself. Now, here's the caveat on that. If, in fact, it is not being seen by this December, it's probably will be the next December, because the apparent normal return, according to biblical scriptures and scriptures of the emperors of China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of them seem to be passing close by during what they refer to as the Passover, or the time of March and April, around that period of time. And again, it's a couple months coming in once it's seen in December. And when it was tracked by the Emperor of China 1,000 years ago, one of the passes, it was their chronology was literally like a week-to-week chronology of it passing through the sky. And again, that corresponds with being seen in December, and then January, February, March, and April going back on out and around and causing problems. As it comes in, according to not myself, but people that have done the astronomy study and the historics on this thing, when it comes in, we will probably pass through the tail one time when it goes behind the sun, and then we will pass through it a second time when it goes out past the sun, and it has already gone by, and we will go through the tail. The tail of this thing is an unknown factor in terms of shooting falling stars and meteorites crashing to the earth, which are described in all of these old scriptures very clearly, including the Bible, and killing the soldiers of the during biblical time, etc. That type of problem. Now, people want to know when the worst of it will start. Unfortunately, what will happen probably is at some point, let's say like a January, February period of time, the satellites and everything will be shut down by the electromagnetic impulses. And those may even be shut down ahead of time at some point when the solar flares from the surface of the sun become so aggravated that they leap out and wipe across the earth. Once that happens, now this is what Napolitano and Wolseley were talking about from the CIA, what they were talking about, when the flares are big enough to affect our electronics, first thing will happen, obviously, would be all the satellites will be fried. And that's the end of every form of communication, since now we are totally dependent. Then, in a short period of time following that, and actually we may be talking just a few days, the electronics of the globe could be totally wiped out.
Jeez.
End of electronics. And what
we've been talking about
here,
that, Bob. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And the worst of it, George, is, and which is something that I can't wrap my head around as well as I would like it to, but when you really think about it, for the individual person on the ground, think about the few times when we've had power out, and even in New York City or some of the big cities. We had it out the other day in Washington.
Yes, you did.
Interesting
We did.
situation there. But anyhow, when the power goes out, we no longer have anything. We have put ourselves in a position to be totally dependent on a flowing electronic.
Well, look what happened. Even retail through Amazon.com. Netflix, everything goes.
Yeah, and of course
everything.
Yeah, and that's one side of it. The real serious part with the guy that's doesn't even buy online. If you don't have electricity for 20 years, because all of the generators have been overloaded, all of the transmission wires have been burnt,
and we don't have any backup transformers.
We have nothing. We have no police. You'll have no food. Any food that's in the grocery store, they did this thing the other day. They did a serious study of how long did it take, like in a bad hurricane. It's like 5 hours once the realization is that power's going to be off for a while. Well, in fact, it is measurable. And, of course, it's only a calculation in reference to calculating the size to be somewhere between 5 and 7 times the diameter of the Earth. So they can do a measurement on that. Obviously, the tail would approximate right at the width of that planet passing and dragging the junk around behind it when we pass through what is going to be an extraordinary meteor storm, a meteor shower, whatever you want to call it, when you pass through all that junk. It will take, according to the experts, I believe the estimate was that it would take an hour to pass through the tail, depending, again, on the angle, the angularity of its approach, and whether it comes in on the plane of the ecliptic, which is the plane of where all of our planets basically are on themselves. If it's on that plane, or if it's coming in 30 or 40 degrees off from a southern direction, which some people are arguing would be the case, that'll change things a little bit. But basically, when we go through it, it will take about an hour to go through it. The Earth, of course, is spinning on a regular basis, so we will be spinning and we'll be exposing many countries to it every time to the front, passing through, so to speak. Then we will go on around. The planet will be, Nibiru would be ahead of us, so to speak, going around the sun, and then it will make its inevitable turn and be dragged back and thrown out into outer space again. That would be, according to experts, it would be about 155 days of travel time between going out around the sun and then coming back out, traveling out in outer space. So it would be about 155 days, and we will go through it, through the tail, one more time, to be bombarded a second time. The effects, again, the big one is going to be space debris hitting us as meteorites or asteroids or whatever it would refer to at that time, space junk. That's going to be serious. But prior to that, we may already be in the dark because of failed electricity. And the rest of it, of course, is the gravitational effect. You know, we forget a little bit, I think on a regular basis, the sun and the moon is what affects our tides on a daily basis. And those are very small gravitational effects. with the moon quite a distance out and not very big compared to Nibiru. But it pulls the water in and out, causing our tides. Now, when you have something that's a solid, dense, which they're assuming that it is by calculation, this dense rock going around the size, 5 times the size of Earth, the gravitational effect could potentially be exactly what happened during Noah's flood, and that was that the oceans were literally yanked out of the seabeds and thrown up on the shore. And not counting the potential tsunamis like the one that we saw a couple of years ago when it wiped out 2 or 3 parts of the Far East, with that one tsunami that was set up only by a medium-sized earthquake in the ocean. When we have a multitude of school bus-sized space junk hitting into the oceans all around the globe, we will have tsunamis that are going to be immeasurable. It doesn't make any difference if you refer to the Bible even as a good text for history. The Revelations is amazing because, for one thing, it talks about the effects of 26-degree tilt, which is apparently what did take place many years ago on the face of the Earth. That's not a lot on one hand, but if it happens in a short period of time, it certainly is going to do a number. And what was amazing, I thought, for myself is in Revelation 6:15, 16, it says that the kings of the earth and the great men and the commanders and the rich and the strong hid themselves away in the caves and the rocks of the mountains. And if that's not what they've ended up doing by digging these underground facilities for themselves, I don't know what is. It's such an amazing description of exactly what has happened going down into building these 103 of these hideouts. Now, there's another problem that I even hate to mention because it's something that nothing to compare it to, but we have about 100 nuclear power generation operations in America. And 1 or 2 of those going into a meltdown because it was unable to be cooled properly or something, and it becomes a Chernobyl like in Russia. But if we end up having 40 of them out of 100 go south, I can't imagine the problems that we're going to have with that. And again, that's separate from tsunami waves and all the rest of the possibility of solar flares and what have you. If you add something as catastrophic as 10, 12, or 35 nuclear power plants going south, well, we'd be really in a problem.
Oh,
no wonder they're going under the ground.
Let's go to JR now, truck driving in Virginia. Welcome to the program. JR, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Hi, George.
Hi.
Great show. I was just curious, how do we know that all this money isn't going to build these facilities just to hide from satellite observation?
I say that again. I'm sorry, all the money what? Say that again.
How do we know all this money that is building these facilities isn't, the facilities aren't being built just to hide from satellite observations?
No. Well, first off, it's the numbers. The numbers of facilities are extraordinary. Number 2, this is being done in China and Russia and Europe, the same as we are. They are doing it for themselves. And in China, for example, they have them so large. And by the way, George, we have live footage and photographs of not all of them, but of many of the facilities on the DVD, so people get a handle of the size of these things. The ones in China are so large that they are hiding away entire battleship fleets of aircraft, and over 3,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles underground in China in advance. They're already in there, not counting the facilities that have been set up for foodstuffs, and for saving their own lives.
It is going to be one heck of a moment when it comes close, Bob, isn't it?
It certainly will. And again, now we have a manner by which we can be aware of, let's say, when the last ticking of the clock is being moved into position, and that is when they declare martial law in America for any reason whatsoever. And I'm assuming it will be, this is from
as an excuse,
analytical assumptions, this will be a few months before December. All right. Now, whether it's this year or the following year, I'm not positive. Gil thinks it's going to be this year, December, when it's seen. That means they will have to have martial law in effect a couple of months before 100,000 junior astronomers, the amateurs, start seeing this up in the sky. They got to already have control of the masses.
And they will report. The amateur astronomers will let us know what's going on.
Like crazy. So, I mean, once you get something that is familiar to the astronomers that spend all of their time watching the stars, all of a sudden there's going to be a pretty good-sized star starting to get larger on a weekly basis. As soon as that happens, they already back off of that. They have to have military martial control of all of the Americas for the most part before that's a time of visitation. In other words, before it's visibly seen by, like I say, 100,000 amateurs in any given week. They're going to be all over the place. But by the time that happens, they're already going to have martial law. So when you see them coming in with talking about several, let's say there's three reasons why they'll utilize. One can be something like Ebola or a disease. That might be a reason for martial law. The other might be that this ISIS or any other terrorist group carries out 4 or 5 major 9/11 events in the United States, and then that would be perfectly well for martial law. The other one could be the possibility of the outbreak of what would be considered on the verge of World War III. And of course, as we've been watching what's going on with Russia and Russia meeting with North Korea and their new petroleum deals with China, we may have a merger with Russia and Korea and or China that could be a good excuse for martial law. So one of those three elements, I believe, I will end up being correct. One of those 4 elements or 3 elements will in fact be one of the reasons for acceptable martial law, so that the American people are going to say, oh boy, thank goodness they put the military on the street corners to protect us. And of course the reality will be that within a few months you'll start finding out the real reason on why you can't go out when you want to go out. And that's going to be because of the martial law protecting the elite that have got to get into their holes in the grounds before we
without us finding out.
So there it is. What do you think? All the trillions spent, underground hideouts, Jade Helm real-life training preparing for something big, Walmart's being connected to the underground tunnel system and being ready for the holding of the bad boys when all hell breaks loose in a panic mode. It's certainly one for considering. Stay tuned for any updates. Thanks for watching. Night now. Remember, hug your mum, hug your cat, hug your t-shirt, stay safe, be prepared, eyes to the skies, bless your armies, keep it real, stay free or be not free, and being not free is being unfree and not free. God bless. Night ladies, pics of me to close.